The land was real, the country was a lie. And somehow, what people paid to move there, they bought land, they bought bonds, they believed in a country that didn't exist. And the man selling it to them, he wasn't even its real ruler. His name was Gregor MacGregor. And this is the story of the man who turned a real piece of land into one of history's most audacious fictional countries. Before MacGregor sold people a country, he had to sell them something else first. Himself. He was Scottish, a soldier, an adventurer, a man who had fought in the wars of independence in South America. He moved through military and political circles, built connections, and developed something that would become more valuable than any piece of land: a reputation. Because when a complete stranger tells you, "I have discovered a country," you probably don't believe him. But when a decorated military figure, with impressive stories, powerful connections, and the confidence of a man who clearly expected to be believed, tells you the same thing, suddenly the impossible starts sounding possible. And MacGregor understood something important. Before you sell people a dream, you have to sell them the person selling it. In 1820, MacGregor became connected to George Frederick Augustus, the Mosquito leader associated with the territory on the Caribbean coast of Central America. MacGregor claimed he had received rights to a huge territory there, and that gave him something he desperately needed: real land. But MacGregor didn't present it as a remote piece of territory. He presented it as something much bigger: a country, a principality, a place called Poyais. And this is where the scam became something extraordinary. Because MacGregor didn't simply lie about a piece of land. He built an entire world around it. MacGregor gave Poyais a history, a government, a political system, commercial institutions, a financial system. He described fertile land, natural resources, a prosperous future. He created the kind of details that make a story feel real. Because that's the trick. A big lie is difficult to believe. But 1,000 small details, those can feel like proof. MacGregor even promoted a detailed guidebook describing Poyais and its opportunities for potential settlers. He created land certificates. He promoted financial securities. And eventually, Poyais even had its own bonds. The British Museum still holds an example of a Poyais bond issued in London in 1823. Think about that. A country that was not what MacGregor claimed it was, had financial documents that looked official enough to enter the real world. He wasn't just selling a story anymore. He was selling paperwork. And paperwork has a dangerous way of making fiction look legitimate. And MacGregor had chosen his moment carefully. London was fascinated by investment opportunities connected to Latin America. Money was flowing into foreign ventures. Investors were looking for the next opportunity. And MacGregor appeared with something irresistible: a new country, a new market, a new future. And suddenly, the question wasn't, is Poyais real? The question became, how do I get in? In 1822, a Poyais loan was issued for a nominal £200,000. The bonds were presented as securities for the development of MacGregor's supposed principality. And the machinery of finance began giving the fictional country something incredibly powerful: legitimacy. Because now, it wasn't just MacGregor saying Poyais existed. There were bonds, there were investors, there were documents, there was money. And once money enters the story, people start believing the story must be real. But MacGregor needed more than investors. He needed people to believe in Poyais so completely that they would leave their homes and go there. And that's exactly what happened. More than 200 people sailed toward Poyais in several ships between 1822 and 1823. They weren't just investing anymore. They were becoming settlers. They packed their belongings. They left their homes. They crossed the Atlantic. They believed they were sailing toward a new country and a new life. Imagine that journey. Weeks at sea. The promise of a prosperous future waiting on the other side. And somewhere ahead of them, the truth. Because the moment they arrived, the story began to fall apart. There was no thriving capital waiting for them. No prosperous settlement matching the promises. No functioning country waiting to welcome its new citizens. They had arrived at a remote and difficult region, and the reality was nothing like the world MacGregor had sold them. The first settlers tried to establish themselves, but supplies became a problem. The settlement deteriorated. Disease spread. People became desperate, and the dream that had looked so convincing from London became something very different on the ground. The land was real. The country was not what they had been promised. And now the lie had become physical. People were no longer losing money. They were losing their health, their homes, their future, and some, their lives. By 1823, the truth was beginning to spread. Reports reached Britain. The supposed country of Poyais was not the flourishing independent state investors had been led to believe. The settlement had failed. The securities had collapsed in value. And the entire story was unraveling. The people who had invested their savings had been investing in a fiction. The people who had sailed across the Atlantic had sailed toward a dream that never existed in the form they had been promised. And MacGregor, he wasn't there. He had already moved on. The man who had built an entire country on paper was now trying to escape the consequences in the real world. You would think, this is where the story ends. It doesn't. MacGregor continued trying to pursue new ventures and schemes. He eventually faced legal trouble in Britain over fraud allegations connected to his activities. But the consequences were nowhere near what you might expect from a scam that had caused such devastation. He was not remembered simply as a criminal who disappeared into prison. His story continued, and eventually, he returned to Venezuela. MacGregor died in Caracas in 1845, and the strange ending to his life makes the story even more difficult to believe. The man behind one of the most audacious financial deceptions of the 19th century had somehow survived the collapse of his own fictional country. But here's where the story gets interesting. Because the biggest question isn't, how did MacGregor invent a country? The bigger question is, how did so many people become willing to believe it? The answer wasn't just greed, it was ambition, status, hope, money, and something even more powerful, the desire to believe. MacGregor understood that people don't all want the same thing. The investor wanted wealth, the settler wanted a new life, the businessman wanted opportunity, the publisher wanted a story, and everyone wanted to believe that they had found something other people hadn't. MacGregor didn't need to convince everyone at once. He only needed to convince the right people, one at a time. First, a story, then a map, then documents, then money, then investors, then settlers. And suddenly, the lie had become bigger than the man who created it. Because now everyone was helping to prove everyone else was right. And this is what makes the story so disturbing. The people who believed MacGregor weren't necessarily stupid. They were human. They saw evidence, a respected-looking man, official-looking documents, financial instruments, a detailed story, other people investing, other people believing, and every new believer made the story seem more credible. That's how a deception grows. Not because one person believes a lie, but because everyone sees everyone else believing it. And once people have invested their money, their reputation, or their entire future, admitting they were wrong becomes much harder. Because now, they aren't just defending the story, they're defending themselves. That is the real story of Poyais. Not simply that one man invented a country, but that one man understood how to make fiction feel real. He gave a real piece of land, a fictional identity, a fictional government, a fictional future. And then, he found people who desperately wanted that future to exist. The land was real. The country was the lie. And the most disturbing part isn't that MacGregor managed to deceive so many people. It's that the lie became stronger every time someone wanted it to be true. Because sometimes, the most convincing lies aren't the ones we're forced to believe. They're the ones we already want to believe.